Hi guys, Dennis here, and welcome to my series on iOS development. This will be part one of a two-part video that will delve into coding an application to use the iPhone's camera and photo library, as well as resizing images down to thumbnail size. We'll start off with a simple view controller that represents an add contacts view, where the user would enter the name, address, etc., and either take a photo of their contact using the iPhone's camera or add one from the photo library. Now here's an important note: unless you have a provisioning profile assigned by Apple enabling you to run simulations on an actual device, you won't be able to take pictures. Obviously the built-in simulator can't take photographs. However, we're going to add all the necessary code that you're going to need. In addition, even if you're using just the built-in simulator, you'll be able to add images that you've loaded into the simulator, and I'll show you how to do that as well. You're going to need some images to complete this project. If you don't have any readily available, go to the About section of my YouTube home channel and download the folder called Custom Table View Cell.zip to your desktop. This folder has 12 or 13 images that are perfect for this project, and it's what I'll be using. As I said, we're going to build an app that will allow us to take a photo using our built-in camera or to pick an existing photo from the iPhone's photo library. We'll add this image to our view controller, but we won't be saving any data. If you want to learn how to save data, take a look at my videos on core data. This video is just about working with the iPhone camera and photo library, and I'll cover creating a thumbnail in part 2. So with that said, we have quite a bit of work ahead of us, so let's get started. Okay, let's open up Xcode. And we're going to create a new project. And as usual, I like to start off with an empty application, so we'll do that. And we're going to call this project Working with Images. Make sure the devices have been set to iPhone, and you can do whatever you'd like with the class prefix. We'll click Next and Create, and we have our project. Okay, we're going to need a couple of things, and number one, we're going to need a storyboard, so let's go ahead and create that. Click New File, User Interface Storyboard, and make sure devices once again have been set to iPhone, and we're going to call this storyboard Main Storyboard. Now next thing we need is a class file. Let's go ahead and create that. So we'll right click once again, New File, and Cocoa Touch, Objective-C Class. And this is going to be a subclass of UIView controller, and we're just going to call this class file Add Contact View Controller. Click Next and Create, and we have that. Okay, next up we're going to jump over to our app delegate M file, and since we're using a storyboard, we can go to our first method. The application did finish launching with options, and we can delete all the code excluding the return statement. Now let's go back over to our project, and under deployment information, under the main interface drop-down box, let's assign our storyboard. Speaking of which, let's jump into our storyboard now, and we're going to need a UI view controller, so let's go ahead and add that. We'll go to our object library and we'll drag an instance of view controller onto our storyboard. And I think it'd be a good idea to go ahead and embed that in a navigation controller, which will give us a nav bar. So let's go ahead and double click in that, and we'll title this Add Contact, like so. While we're here, let's click on our view controller and go to our identity inspector and assign the class file that we just created to this view controller, and that was Add Contact View Controller. Okay, so I think we're ready to add our objects, and the first one we want is an instance of UIView, and we're going to position it up at the top left. Now UIView is a container. We'll grab that right there. And this container is going to hold it's going to hold our default image. It's also going to hold our contact folder and also a pick photo label. and you'll see what I mean here in just a few moments here. So let's get an approximate position of that here. We'll go over to our size inspector, and I want to make this width 88 by 88. And we'll make the x coordinates 20 and the y, let's make that 170. So that'll bring it right up in the top left hand corner. Let's go over to our attribute inspector. We're going to set a couple of things. Number one is we're going to change the background from white color to clear color. And while we're here, let's select clip subviews like so. Okay, there's several other things we can do to the UIView container, but before we do, let's add some labels on here just for decorations, just to make this look like a real interface, although we won't be doing anything with these labels. Let's bring them on here anyway here, because it's only going to take a second, like so. And we'll just stretch that out like that. Do the same with that guy. And that guy, and that guy. Okay, we'll call this first one first name, and we'll make the second one last name. And as I said, these labels aren't going to do anything. They're just going to represent what would normally be text boxes where we'll be entering information. But right now we're just going to use them for decoration. We'll make this one address, and this last one city, like so. Okay, now it looks a little bit more like a user interface. So the next thing we need is we need an image that we're going to use as our default image. So we've got to drag an image into our project folder, and on my desktop I have the custom table view cell.zip folder that's available up on my about page, so I'm going to use that. And I think I want to use this Steve Jobs photo or image as my default image, and the reason being is it's quite a large image. So I'm going to drag that over and make sure that copy items into destinations group folder is selected so we get everything copied over like so. And we can go ahead and take a look at that image, and as I indicated, it's a fairly large image. It's a portrait kind of image, so it doesn't readily make itself available for a user interface, and that's one of the reasons why we want to create a thumbnail in it eventually. But for right now, there is a couple of things that we can do to that. So let's go back over to the storyboard. So now that we have our image in our project folder, let's open up our utilities panel once again. Next thing we need to do is drag an instance of UIView from our object library. And we'll make it a subview of UIView, the container that we've already added. So let's now open up our document outline like so, and we'll spread all these guys out like that. And this is so we can manipulate our objects with a little bit more precision. And using the document outline, we're going to drag our image view and place it on top of the view that we just added to make it a subset. So let's select our view so we'll know where it is, and it's right there. So we want to drag our UI image view and put it right on top of this guy right here to make it a subset of view. And you can tell when things are a subset because it'll indent a couple of spaces to the right. So let's do a search for UI image view like so, and we're going to just drag this right over into our document outline just like that. And as you can see, it indented to the right, meaning it is in fact a subset, and we can check that out. Let's check on the container view first, and we'll go to the X and Y, and that is 20 and 170 just like we had set it up. And let's click on the image view now, and look at this. The X and Y coordinate is slightly different, and the reason being is that since we made it a subset of the container view, its origin is now the top left corner of the container view and not the top left corner of the view controller. So now let's assign an image to this image view. So let's select that and go to our attributes inspector, and we're going to add our Steve Jobs image to this like so. Now it looks really funny here, so let's see if we can tidy it up a little bit here. Let's go back over to our attributes, and right now it's set to, as a matter of fact, let's go to our container view first. We'll click on our container, and let's make sure clip subviews has been set, which it has, and then scale to fill, let's change that to aspect fill, like so. Now we'll go back over to our image view, and we're going to change the scale to fill to aspect fill as well. And we want to make sure that that has also been selected as clip subviews. So that's going to look a little bit better there. So let's take a run and see what it looks like. Doesn't look too bad. Our user interface does a lot for us over here. Let's change our simulator. Okay, well it's already set to 4-inch, so that's good. Okay. Okay, so far so good. So the next thing we need to add is a little label that we're going to stick on the bottom of this image that says pick photo, and that's to indicate to the user, hey, click here or tap here, and then you can either pick a photo from the photo library, or you can use the camera and take a photo. So let's do a search on label once again. And we'll put our label right there. And we know that our label needs to be 88 wide, so let's go to the size inspector. So the width needs to be 88, like so. And the height, I think probably 20 is going to be good for our height, because we don't want it too big. And let's go over to the attributes inspector and let's center our text. And then speaking of which, let's change our text from label to pick photo, like so. Now let's go ahead and position that right on top of our existing photo. Now obviously we're going to need to change the font color. So let's do something there, and let's try white. That might work, and that looks pretty good actually. Let's change it to System Bold though. We'll make it 18 and we'll change it to System Bold. See if that looks even better. And I think that, well, that might be just a little bit too big. Let's knock that down to 17, like so. Let's go ahead and build it and run it and see what that looks like. I think it's going to be pretty good though. And pick photo, that looks pretty good. So the object of the game, what our mission is here, is then when the viewer sees that, he knows, let's assume that he's entered his contact name, first name and last name and address and city, and whatever else might be on your view controller. And now he wants to add a photo, and that can either be to take a photo with the camera or browse the photo library. And this little indication, pick photo, that's an indication to him to tap on it. Of course it doesn't do anything yet. We got to do that next. So let's close that and we'll tackle that job next. So as I said, what we're trying to do here is to prompt the user to tap the photo container, which will then open up a dialog box and ask whether the user wants to take a photo using the camera or grab an existing photo from the iPhone's photo library. Now UIView, which is our container, is not a subclass of UI control. So in order to recognize when a user taps the container view, we need to add what's called a tap gesture recognizer to our view. So let's go down to our object library and we'll just type in a tap, and we see it right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag that over to our document outline and place it right below our label. Now when you do this, just like so, Xcode places the recognizer at the bottom of the list, which is completely normal, so don't look for it to appear up under the view. It's going to appear down at the bottom. Now to make sure that it's pointing to our view and nothing strange, let's go ahead and select it and right click and open up its contextual menu and make sure that it's pointed to the outlook, which is view, and in this case it's doing just what we want. There's our gesture recognizer, and its outlet is the view. So that's perfect. Let's close that. Okay, so now we're ready to add our properties. So let's close out our utility panel, and we'll select our view controller and open up our assistant editor. And we need to go to our header file, and we're going to need a little bit of room here. Okay, so since we've got objects layered on top of one another, the best and most accurate way to grab these guys is to control drag from our document outline. We're going to be using our document outline quite a bit in this. So we're going to need three properties. We're going to need one for our container view, one for our image view, and one for our label. So let's go ahead and first of all we'll grab our container view, which is this guy right here, and we'll control drag like so. And this will be an outlet, and we're just going to call this container view. Our second one will be an image view, so let's click on our image view, and once again we're going to control drag, and sometimes when you do that you end up dragging the whole thing over, so just be careful. And this will be called image view like so. And the last guy we need is a property for our label. Label like so. Now before we leave this view, there's one additional thing we need in our header, and that's going to be an IB action, and that action is going to be against the tap gesture recognizer. So let's click on that and control drag. We don't want the whole thing, there we go. And this time it's going to be an action, and we're going to name this did tap photo like so. And let's change the type to a gesture recognizer like so. Okay, now we can jump over to our implementation file. Let's close out our assistant editor, and we'll jump over to our source file here, and we'll scroll down to the did tap photo. We want to verify that we have coded this thing correctly here, so let's just stick a little log statement in. So we'll do an ns log, and we'll say, let's see, user tapped photo. That's good enough. Okay, let's build and run and see if our gesture recognizer is picking up that. And there's our photo. So we should, once we click anywhere in this container, we ought to get a log statement down here that the user tapped the photo. So let's click on that, and we did in fact get a user tap photo. So our gesture recognizer is working the way it's supposed to. So let's go ahead and stop that build. So now that we know that the container view is recognizing a tap, we can finish coding the rest of the did tap photo method. But first we need to go to our header and declare in our header file that our class conforms to the UI action sheet delegate protocol. So let's jump over to our header, and we all know by now how to add protocol. So this is the UI action sheet, delegate protocol like so. Okay, now we can go back over to our source file and we can finish coding the did tap photo method. And the first thing we want to do is check to see if we even have a camera. And to do that, we're going to use an if statement with a logical not. So we do an if, and we use a logical not, and then we do a bracket, and we call UI image picker controller, UI image picker controller, and we just want the controller here, so let's use code sense so we make sure we get the right guy here, and it's that one right there. And we want to call the method is source type available, which is right there. And the source type that we're looking for, of course, is a UI source type camera. So we do a UI image picker source type picker controller source type oh, it's right on there, perfect. UI image picker controller source type camera. It's quite long, that's why I like to use code sense here, so we make sure that it picks up the right one. Now if this returns true, in other words there is no UI picker controller source type camera, then we want to do a couple of things. We want to run a log statement, and then we want to go ahead and return, which would send us back to the view controller. So let's do the ns log, and we'll just write no camera detected, and then we'll add a return statement. Okay, now if it comes back false, then we want to go ahead and do the next step, and that is to create an instance of UI action sheet. That's the sheet that's going to show us a couple of buttons to choose whether we want to use or take a photo, or whether we want to choose from the iPhone's library. So we'll create an instance of UI action sheet, and then we'll just call this action sheet. And then we need an alloc and an init. So a couple of brackets, UI action sheet, alloc, and then the init's kind of long here. We want to do an init with title. And this first thing it says, well, what is our title? Well, we're not going to have a title, so we're just going to put nil in there. And then it's going to ask us for our delegate, and our delegate is going to be self. Now it's going to ask us what our cancel button title is, and that's going to be easy because it's just going to be cancel. Now it's going to ask us the destructive button title, and we're not going to have one, so we're just going to put a nil there. And then it asks us for our other button titles, and we are going to have two of those titles. And the first one is going to be used for taking a photo, and we're just going to call this take a photo. So we'll do an @ and we'll say take a photo. And then we have to separate our other button titles with a comma. So another @ and a quote, and this will be use photo library. And then we end it with a nil, and then of course we need a semicolon to finish it off. So let's double check and make sure we have all this correct here. UI action sheet, and then we do an alloc and an init, and our init with title, our title is going to be nil, our delegate will be self, our cancel button title will be canceled. We're not going to be using a destructive button title, so that'll be nil. Other button titles, take, oh, we forgot the A there, take a photo, and then comma, and our button 2 will be use photo library. Now incidentally, these are referenced by what is called button index. So this first guy here, take a photo, will be button index number 0, and the second one here will be button index number 1. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is show our action sheet that we just created. So that's an action sheet, and then we want to just call show in view. And our view is, of course, self.view, like so. So let's build and run, see what we have. And I know what's going to happen, but I want you to see this. So let's go ahead and click run. And we want to go ahead and select pick photo. Well, nothing happens, and if we look down in our debugger, it says no camera detected. And the reason why nothing happened, in other words, our action sheet wasn't displayed, is because we have a return when it doesn't display or doesn't detect a camera. And this is what we should have if we're using a real device, but since we're using a simulator, let's go ahead and just comment out this return. But keep a note, if you are running on an actual device, in other words, you have a provisioning profile and you're running on an actual iPhone device, you want to uncomment this return so it does run. All right, let's run this one more time, and now we're going to be able to call up our action sheet. So we'll click our photo, and now we have our 3 buttons, our cancel button, our button index number 0, which says take a photo, and our button index number 2 that says use photo library. Now none of these work. If we were to click on it, it's just going to return us back to the view controller. That's because we haven't coded those methods, and we're going to do that now. So to recap, we've implemented our action sheet. Now we need to code the methods to either take photos or browse the iPhone's photo library. And the easiest way to accomplish that is to use a component from the iOS SDK called UI Image Picker Controller. And this guy is going to do all the heavy lifting for us. But first we're going to need to add 2 more protocols, the UI Image Picker Controller Delegate and the UI Navigation Controller Delegate. So let's add those guys to our header now. So we'll jump over to our header, and we need a comma here, and we'll do the first one, the Image Picker Controller Delegate. Image Picker Controller Delegate, and the second one is a UI Navigation Controller Delegate, like so. Okay, so you may be wondering why we're adding the UI navigation controller delegate protocol when we don't intend to implement any of its methods. It's because UI image picker controller, an object that we're going to instantiate here in a moment, implements both UI image picker controller delegate and UI navigation controller delegate protocols. So if we didn't conform our class to the UI navigation controller delegate, we'd end up getting compiler warnings. So now we can jump over to our source file. So we've added a UI picker controller delegate protocol. We've declared that in our header. So obviously we're going to need to instantiate an image picker. So let's first create a property for that. And we'll do that right after the interface. So that's an app property. We'll make that non-atomic and strong. And this is a UI image picker controller. That guy right there. And we're just going to call this image picker. Okay, so now we need to instantiate an instance of our image picker controller when it's first referenced. And incidentally, this is called lazy loading. So we're going to need a custom method. And let's just go down here to right after our init statement, and we'll make our custom method right here. So this is a UI image picker controller, and we need a pointer and image picker and a couple of brackets. So the first thing we need to do is check to see if there's already an instance of an image picker, and if not, we're going to create it, and we'll use an if statement to do that. So we do an if, and then we need an underscore image picker is equal to nil. Then if it is equal to nil, we want to create it, so we need to do an alloc and an init. So we do an image picker equals a couple of brackets, UI image picker controller alloc and an init. We also need to set the delegate, so we do underscore image picker dot delegate equals self. Okay, and then finally we need to return it, so we do a return underscore image picker. That finishes that method. So now we're ready to code our two custom methods, one for taking photos, the other one for browsing photos stored in our iPhone library. Both of these methods will require just two statements. The first statement defines the source type, and the second statement calls the present view controller. The present view controller depends on what the source type is, incidentally. So the first thing we'll do is handle the photo library first. So let's just go down to the bottom here, and let's dress this up a little bit and give ourselves some room here. And like I said, the first one we're going to create will be to pick a photo from the library. So this is going to be a void, and we're just going to call this pick photo from library. Like so. Come on. Okay, having a hard time typing here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is define the source type. So in this first method, our source type obviously is going to be the photo library. So we do that with a self.imagePicker.source type, and that's equal to UI image picker controller source type photo library. It's quite a long one. UI image picker controller source type, there it is, photo library. And use code sense because some of these methods are so long, it's just ridiculous. Okay, so that's what we need there. So then we call the present view controller, which will present the user with a controller used to select a photo from the library. And that is going to require a bracket, and we do a self.navigation controller, and then we call the present view controller, and make sure that you select the present view controller, not the presenting view controller. And just look for the real long one. Everything we do in this example or this video seems to be very long methods here. So the present view controller is asking us for the UI view controller, and that's going to be a self.imagePicker. And then animated, we want to do a yes. And then completion, we want to do a nil. Like so. And now we can do the camera. Now it's going to be very similar to this. Let's first write out the method here. So that's a void. And we'll just call this take photo with camera. And we're going to go ahead and just copy this because it's going to be pretty close to the same thing. We're only going to make one change, and I bet you can guess what the change is. Instead of the source type being UI image picker controller source type photo library, of course we want source type camera. So let's make that change. So we want UI image picker source type camera, and that's just right above the library actually. That wasn't too bad. Like so. Okay, so now that we have our take photo with camera and our pick photo from library methods written, we can add a delegate method that will respond to the user selecting either the camera or the library in the action sheet. So we'll just go right down here and add that delegate method. And that is an action sheet, and we want to use the did dismiss with button index method. Like so. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room here. Okay, so we're going to use an if statement with an embedded switch, and we're going to look to the cancel button or the other buttons to determine what action needs to happen. So first, if the button index is equal to the cancel button, we're going to simply execute a return and do nothing else. So let's start off with an if statement. If, and then we're going to look to that button index, and if that's equal to nil, we want to do this, action sheet dot cancel, that's what we want to do, cancel button index. Then we're going to simply do a return. Now we got to get rid of this curly brace here, don't forget that. We want to have a semicolon after that since we're doing the return right after that first statement here. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're looking at the action sheet cancel button index, and if that evaluates to true, then it's simply going to return. If not, then we're going to determine what index is being called. Is it case number 0, which is index number 0, or case number 1? So to do that, we'll just use a switch statement. And once again, we're going to switch on the button index. So case number 0, we're going to call the self take photo with camera method that we just wrote. If not that one, then it'll be case number 1, and we know that that is the photo, so we're going to do self take, that's going to be pick from library. Pick photo from library, that's the guy that we want. And we got one too many brackets there. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit and let's double check it and walk through this once again. Okay, so this is our delegate method here. So we're going to look at the action sheet cancel button index property, and if that returns true, then we're going to go ahead and return it back to our view controller. Otherwise, we're going to fire the switch statement and we're going to switch on the button index. And as I mentioned before, index 0 is the take a photo with camera button. Index number 1 is the pick photo from library button. Okay, so we've got one more method to code, and this is going to grab the image from our UI image picker controller, however we've gotten it, and assign it to the image property of our image view that we've added to our view controller. So let's do a void once again, and this will be an image picker controller, and we want to use the did finish picking media like that. Okay, so first we got to dismiss the picker, so let's just do a bracket and say picker, and we'll call the dismiss view controller animated, and we'll do a yes and a completion with a nil. like so. Then we'll create a UI image object and assign the original image that's held by the picker controller to that. So we do an UI image, and we'll just call this image equals, and we want to grab the info of the UI image picker controller original image. So let's just use info, and then we need a bracket, and UI image picker controller, and we want the original image there. There it is. Now incidentally, if you're confused, or actually even if you're not confused, I highly recommend that you do an option click on these guys like this and take a look and see what these things do. That's going to give you a lot of information here. Okay, so finally in this method we assign our new image to the image property of our image view. And remember, we added an instance of image view to our UI view controller, our container. So we want to do a self.imageView image equals image. Okay, let's build and run, see what we have here. Now we ought to be able to select a photo from our photo library, so let's click on that. And let's use photo library. I'll click on that, and it should open the photo library, which it does. Now I can select that, and now I can go into my library and select a number of images. And let's select Sarah Evans, and now Sarah Evans appears in my contact folder. Okay, so what if you don't have images in your simulator? How do you go about adding those images? So let's go through that real quick just so you can load up your simulator with some images here. So let's stop this build here, and let's open up my custom table view cell.zip folder here that has a bunch of images in it. And now let's run the simulator one more time. And to get to the home screen from the simulator, we want to do a Shift Command H. And that takes us to the home screen just like so. And now we can take our images and just drag them onto the simulator. And then once it's over the simulator, release it. And then now your image will be shown. This is an image of Patricia Beck, gorgeous woman here. So to save this, just hover over the image and hold down the left click until you get your dialog box, and this says Save Image. So we'll save that. And you can just continue to do that. Let's do Brad Pitt over here. We'll just drag Brad over here and release it, and there's Brad, and we'll hold it down, and we can save image. So you want to do that to, get 4 or 5 on there so you can play around with the various images. And now when you run the application again, and we can do a Control H and go back and run this. I forgot what it's called here, so we'll just start it all over again. And now when you pick a photo from your library, you'll be like me and you'll have 17 photos in here, and some of these are duplicates obviously because I just added some. Okay, so everything looks good. We can select an image from our library and it fits nicely into our container view, and also it's nicely cropped. But believe it or not, we still have a problem that needs to be addressed. We could potentially be saving huge images to our phone that we've taken with our camera. Most of the time, images really only need to be in the form of thumbnails, otherwise we'd end up wasting a lot of memory storing images. What we need is a way to resize images to a more efficient and manageable size, and that's what we're going to do in part 2 of the series. So I will see you in part 2. Once again, I appreciate all your comments. If you like what you see, give me the thumbs up, and please don't forget to subscribe.